So what has primarily tripped me out the most as far as people, times, places, space, events, how somebody could step into life and believe in the most asinine belief system, though it was commonly accepted and so readily available. Yet certain people with a higher intellectual moral platitude, that is, before they could even get up in the morning, they had to contemplate if they would kill something, taking their very first step out of bed, or maybe the transition of this metabolic function coming out of a REM, slow wave sleep cycle dream state would destroy an entire world of held contention. And you find that the people who are the most capable of merging this techne, that is really involving a skill, an art form that has arguably produced or co-produced the technology, though from the ratification of a field response, that is information that was possibly pre-existent on some codified scale or level, perhaps within us, more than likely, that worked almost like a telomeric antenna that would draw grouping or like energies back to the source. And Jesus alludes to this in the Nag Hammadi Dead Sea Scrolls, if you will, that we all go back into our own roots. So how can you step forward when you haven't really recollected your reason for doing anything, right? In fact, you could say, and wouldn't have to argue too far on it, that for you to believe in something so concretely that you would step forward, thereby purging other people that are more qualified, that you did it under the contention of competition, and that you are the lower moral agent. And in fact, you could become depressed if you were a deeper thinker as to say that this is a sign within you, that it is so localized to you, that you have become the arbitrator or the conduit of this very malignant malice form of pernicious acts and deeds. But people don't do this. They compartmentalize themselves. They split, they bifurcate, and they don't stop until this DID division of self and expression of selfhood when there's no recollection or reckoning of a self there in the first place, because they do not have the prime directive of where they come from, who their daddy is. I love Operation GCD pointing that out, and it's often one of great amusement. So thank you, JJ Vance, for introducing that. That is funny and whimsically on spot every single time. But how can you step forward in life if you don't know A, who God is, B, if there's a God at all, C, if you aren't a direct manifestation of this particular God, and D, that the diabolical aspects of inference, as to say that you are acting out through your nature, through the ontology that is directed around you, the field that you live in, the very actionable deeds that is codified and mimetically forked off of a main current of information and codified strand, that is the algorithm, is perpetuating you like a mercenary to go about completing such tasks. So if you aren't going through some sort of existential crisis, I would say there's something really wrong with you. And I would say the fact that the majority doesn't go through this cathartic response or metanoia, as I brought up, where they have come to this place where they realize every action, every thought, every breath that I take is taking from another life form. It's taking from, I smash the ants that are bothering me in my kitchen, literally, in the kitchen that I currently use, where they are highly more organized, more functional, more specific and direct with what the outcome is. And in fact, they infer through this respect process that they stoically accept their existence and that they know, like soldiers marching through this canyon of giants, that they have this red dot on their head and they still gallantly go about their tasks, even though they know they may be met with certain death, right? And so it just gets into a whole other area of the ontology and this false representation of, if this is true and these were fabricated beings, if they come from a blueprint of engineering, then what does this serve? What does this energy, on-running energy support as an algorithm that's introduced where man at his highest level becomes defunct until he produces something that would be something of obviously some sort of antiquity, because we don't just celebrate people if they're talked about. Otherwise, there would be God like Og and Magog or Prometheus, or if we want to get into it, Gilgamesh, or other people that may have speculatively actually existed, whether or not these were actually gods themselves, right? There's a lot of Egyptian lore that goes around this, right? That has heavy documentation. We're just trying to factor out whether or not these are just euphemisms to tell stories or parables, or if there really was the inference of just giants in itself. This is why the Smithsonian and so many other covert clandestine institutions scramble away with this proof, right? Because if we could prove one thing and we could look at Tartaria and prove another and substantiate this, it would lead us into a mass awakening that would force the notion to find out where all this black project money is going into as far as these discoveries with inner earth or interdimensional parallel realities of existence, and what this really means and how it directly ties into fundamentally whether or not we exist for a purpose. Our family members are dying off. We're going through this toxic, the COVID vaccinations and the internet of bodies that was introduced to so many people, and the fact that so many people are dying. We should be not only just frustrated but infuriated that this form of reckoning, whatever it was thought to be, always comes in this malformed, malfeasant use of capitalism that ends up just fleecing people's pockets over and over again. So we know by all factual quality, this is driving people antithetically to believe in this theological fundamentalist God, where they go back to the crux of their belief systems and realize that this was most likely written by a Masonic heritage of Masons that were either a break off of the Knights Templar, a break off of the Ophites, right, that came, or the Sarmatians, and that this begins to take on a very Frankist sort of quality, right, where you look at Frankism and you're looking at the Kabbalah and you're seeing who really runs the world, who really runs the country, this weird occult mechanism that we want to turn a blind eye to, yet we use that dollar that harkens back to it, right, and we think if we just pray after we do all our misdeeds that there's some kind of reckoning with this altruistic God that's going to forgive us, even though all the deeds that we did throughout the day were self-preserving. And when we go the other way and we get real with ourselves, and this has been done many, many times, right, where people just walk into a mountainous region, they walk off into the forest, they're no longer going to serve the false ideology, they're no longer going to lie to themselves or anyone else, and they are rendered useless, and either they turn up dead or they just disappear, so that they're not a burden on anyone else, because it's even a burden purging out and getting rid of the artifice of your own body.